We are excited to have Karey Windbiel-Rojas presenting today on non-chemical methods for pest management. Karey is the Associate Director for Urban and Community IPM with UC IPM and an Urban IPM Advisor for Yolo, Solano, and Sacramento Counties. As Associate Director, Karey provides leadership and coordinates communication and educational efforts to address urban pest issues around homes, structures, landscapes, gardens, schools, and public areas. Thank you for joining us, Karey. You may now share your slides and begin.
Thank you, Belinda. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to join today and to discuss with you how you can cover, smash, and trap any pest issues that you might have around the home, garden, landscape, indoors, outdoors, wherever a pest might be causing problems for you. So today we are going to mainly cover non-chemical methods for controlling pests, and we will be covering how to do that for our various pest categories, which include insects and other invertebrates, plant pathogens, any undesirable vegetation that we call weeds, and whenever an animal becomes a pest in your landscape or garden, we consider those as our animal pests or vertebrate pests. And so we'll be covering some methods for non-chemical control there too. Now, our presentation today does encompass a lot of different tools covering a lot of different pests and their methods. So this is really just a general overview of these non-chemical methods, and we cannot really cover any specific pest management for individual pests. We do have a huge website if you're not familiar with it, and we'll be referring to it as we go along through the day. So if you have general questions, we'd love your general questions, but try not to say, how do I control the earwigs when they come into my house? We'll generally cover that, but we can't get into specifics. Okay, thank you. First, let's jump into how we can apply some non-chemical control methods for insects and other invertebrates. And invertebrate pests are some of the most frequent pests that we encounter in our homes, landscapes, and gardens. So there are many things that you can do that do not require any use of pesticides. One of our tactics that we can use is to remove the pest. You can physically control some of the insect pests by removing them. And this can involve pruning infested branches. So if you have an aphid or a whitefly or another sort of insect pest that's in high abundance, and you can prune out those leaves or branches, that is one way to physically control them. You can hand pick those caterpillars. You can hand pick the snails and slugs. You can squish them with your pruners, with your trowel, with your bare hands, whatnot. You can hand pick them and feed them to the chickens. You can leave them out for the birds. Lots of different ways that you can physically remove them. You can catch them and release them. So if you've got a pest indoors that doesn't belong there, you can scoop it up with some sort of cup or instrument, and you can let it back outdoors if you don't want to squish it. For outdoor plants and for more sturdy plants, you can use your hose end sprayer to spray off infested plant parts. And this works really well for aphids, where you can, and what's pictured here is roses. Roses are nice and sturdy, so you can just put the hose on a strong stream and knock off some of those aphids. And you might need to do that more than once. It will really greatly reduce the population, but some aphids may still be there. So a lot of the methods that I'm talking about is not necessarily a once and done. And it's all part of our integrated strategy on how to manage your pests, combining a lot of these things that I'm going to talk about today. Indoors, if you can see a pest and you don't want to squish it, you can vacuum it up. We always say, those indoor sprays are not necessary. If you can see it and you could touch it, but you don't want to touch it, you can vacuum it up. and that does a really good job indoors as well. Another important aspect of integrated pest management and non-chemical control is sanitation, or keeping an area clean and debris free, or where you're not providing a source of food or hiding places for the pest. So outdoors, good hiding places include weeds or leaves or other debris. You can see this backyard, which is not my backyard, that's full of hiding places and breeding habitats. So you want to try and clean things up, removing weeds that can harbor pests, anything that can hold water, which would be a breeding site for many different kinds of mosquitoes. So you want to try and keep things clean. Indoors, you can regularly vacuum, as I mentioned, but also clean up any food sources, any spilled food, any crumbs, any pet food, anything that you drop while cooking. So mopping floors, cleaning floors, and this includes surfaces, not just the floor. However, you can reduce the crumbs and any small bits of food that could be attractive to pests coming in, or sustain any pests that might already be in the house. Many pests are searching for a source of water, so fixing any leaks or any humid conditions indoors and outdoors can reduce what's attracting the pest to be in that area. So reducing any kind of moisture. And then outdoors, you want to pick up any pet waste because flies can be attracted to the pet waste, and then the flies could land on food and contaminate them with bacteria. So you want to, try and maintain that sanitation. And then any kind of stored pet food, and this includes bird seed. If you keep it in a tightly sealed container, it will exclude any kind of pests from getting to the pet food, or to any kind of bird seed food. Exclusion is a huge component of keeping pests out, and it's one of the ways that we can prevent pests from becoming a problem, so that we don't have to spend time actually managing it. So can you do things in anticipation of a pest coming to attack your plants or coming indoors? So looking for ways that a pest could come indoors or that might access your plants, and thinking ahead of ways to build them out or to block them. So for indoor pests, you want to seal any gaps or cracks that allow the pest to come indoors. And how big of a gap or a crack we're talking about will depend on what kind of pest you are anticipating. Ants and crawling insects can get in through really small cracks, of course, but even rats and mice can enter a building in smaller openings than you might think. It only takes a 1/4 inch for a mouse, and about a 1/2 inch for rats. So really small areas. Outdoors, you can cover your plants, especially when they are just seedlings and starting to grow, covering them with protective coverings that will keep out the small insects, or you could cover them with a kind of netting to keep birds from harvesting your fruit before you're ready to harvest your fruit. It does depend, the size and the type of exclusion material depends on what kind of pests you are probably facing. Also back to indoors, you can install door sweeps, weather stripping, and these materials do vary. What's shown here is kind of a fibrous door sweep, but there are metal door sweeps that are more of a solid plate, and those will block any kind of crawling insect or rodent from being able to get underneath the door. Weather stripping is going to be great around doors and windows, not just for climate control, but also to block pests from being able to get in. And of course, tight-fitting screens on doors and windows that don't have any openings so that small insects or even rodents can't get through. Shown in that last slide was storing food in containers with tightly sealed lids. That's going to not allow any pests to get into your food, but if there's pests already there that you brought in from when you purchased the food, those pests cannot get out and then go contaminate other areas in the kitchen or the pantry. So those are great ways to exclude and to also prevent. And I showed in the last slide, mosquito breeding habitats. When you are out doing your gardening or on a hike or doing anything outdoors, even just sitting and enjoying the weather in the evening, having bare skin could open you up to mosquito bites. So when you are outdoors during mosquito biting time, you might want to wear some protective clothing to reduce the skin available for mosquitoes. Now moving on to traps for insect pests. So we have various types of traps available, and we can't possibly show you all of them. What kind of trap you might use really depends on what pest and in what situation you have. So the first picture on the upper left here shows a sticky trap. Sticky traps are usually used for monitoring the population of a pest so that you can know, okay, there's only a couple, maybe I don't need to do anything to control them, or the sticky trap is totally full. That means I have an infestation, and this is, the next step is to find measures of control. So the types of sticky traps, the colors of sticky traps, when to hang the traps, those really all depend on your target pest. And the picture next to that shows a snail capture trap, which is something that you can easily make from home with just some planks of wood. We have instructions on our Snails and Slugs pest note on our website, where you just put together a couple planks with about a 1-inch riser on the bottom. You put that down in an area that you have seen snails or slugs or anticipate them being, usually in moist areas, because snails need moisture to move. And you put that down maybe overnight, and then in the morning you pull up the board and you can see that you've collected some snails and slugs. And then what you do with them is up to you. You can smash them, you can throw them to the chickens, you can throw them in the street, you can feed them cornmeal and make escargot, what have you. So that's one kind of trap. The one in the bottom shows a tanglefoot sticky barrier, which can be used to keep ants from getting into a tree where you might have another kind of pest, a honeydew producer. And so the tanglefoot will not allow the ants to crawl up the tree, except the ants will crawl over each other. So you have to remove it and then reapply it. We have a whole video on how to do that we will show you where to find later. And then the last picture here is showing a yellow jacket trap that uses a non-pesticidal chemical to attract yellow jackets into this trap, and then they can't get out. And so I could go on and on about traps. There are so many different kinds available. So visit the UC IPM website once you have a pest that you want to find the tools for managing. And I assure you there will be some sort of trap mentioned about that. Moving on to another non-chemical control that is likely known by most everyone here. We have our good bugs or natural enemies or beneficials or beneficial insects, biological control agents. There's so many different terms that we use. UC IPM, we like to use the term natural enemies. These are naturally occurring enemies of pests. They're not our enemies. And there are predators, parasites, and pathogens that will be naturally occurring that will attack, hunt down, or parasitize a pest host. And so what's shown here is In the upper picture is a parasitic wasp that lays multiple eggs inside of this caterpillar host. And all those white things are the cocoons of the parasite that has emerged out of the caterpillar host, and they pupate on the outside. And then from each of those, an adult parasitic wasp will emerge. And when we say parasitic wasp, we mean really, really tiny wasps, not the kind of yellow jackets or wasps that are going to be pests that sting us. And this occurs all the time. There are so many different types of parasitic wasps that are associated with one particular host species, and they rely on that host in order to reproduce. And we cover that in another webinar that is focused on biological control. Many of our predators and parasites are naturally occurring. We don't really have to do anything. The picture at the bottom shows a spider, and if you can see, it does have a fly that that's a jumping spider has captured, and it is now eating. So there are many different kinds of naturally occurring predators. Spiders are wonderful generalist predators that help us do our pest control. And the picture next to that is, of course, a ladybug, or more correctly, a lady beetle. And that particular lady beetle is Hippodamia convergens, the convergent lady beetle, which is the type of beetle that if you were to buy ladybugs in the store, this is the species that you would then go and release. And it's important to know that these natural enemies occur, but it's also important to know the life stages of them so that you can recognize the brightly colored eggs of the convergent lady beetle, which you can see there, and also the larval stage, which looks like a little black alligator with reddish orange spots. And that will help you know that these are natural enemies. They're helping do your pest control, and you can check for signs of both predators and parasites in your backyard. All right, that was a lot on invertebrate pests and non-chemical control. So now we're going to move over to plant pathogens. And for plant pathogens, the same general concepts about removal, either physical controls or cultural controls, they do have a place in the non-chemical control of pathogens as well. So you can prune out infestations. If you have a diseased part of a plant, you can destroy them either by composting and making sure your compost is at the correct temperature to kill the pathogen, but you can also put them in your yard waste. You can leave them in a pile in the back 40. You can bury the infected plant parts, and they can kind of compost themselves. In some areas, you might be able to burn compost or debris piles, but you need to check with your local ordinance about burn days or other restrictions. But one important thing is when you are pruning out any kind of diseased plant part, you do want to sanitize your pruners after cutting, especially if you're going to use the pruners to cut other plants, because you don't want to be removing the pathogen on the pruners. So we do have information on the UC IPM website about how to make a solution of water and bleach to clean your pruning equipment. You might not think about it, but many insects that are naturally found as pests on our plants can also move some plant pathogens and be the way a plant becomes diseased. So feeding by some of these pests can transfer the disease, and in the way they feed, they can transmit it and or open up the plant to being attacked by some of the naturally occurring pathogens. There are certain insects that do transfer viruses to plants. There are some specific species of leafhoppers, some aphids, and also a couple different kinds of beetles that can transmit viruses. There are beetles that actually will farm a fungus. So the invasive shot hole borer, for instance, and there's a couple other boring beetles that will introduce a fungus into a tree, and they help farm or grow that fungus because they feed on it, and that fungus ends up killing the tree. So they're not injecting it, but they're carrying it in their mouth parts, and it's because that's their home. And so the beetle's not actually the one that's eating the tree. The beetle is growing the fungus. And then of course these um insect feeders that have a needle-like mouth part can move disease, like I said, from one plant to another, especially viruses. And so um, these needle-like mouthpart feeders, we refer to them sometimes as honeydew producers too. Many of them do produce honeydew, um, which is their waste product as they feed, as they suck that plant sap out of the plant. And when they produce this honeydew, it gets all sticky all over the place, either on plant leaves or on the ground or on your car. And what can grow from that is another fungus called sooty mold that can then cover the leaves and any surface where that honeydew is. So a lot of insects and plant diseases are linked together. Same as what I spoke of with good cleanliness, sanitation. With plant diseases, we want to rake up and dispose of any fallen leaves, twigs, and fruit that could be a source of a damaging plant pathogen for the next season. So keeping things clean in the backyard and also removing these potential sources of disease. You want to remove and discard any infected plants and soil. So if you know you have a plant that just didn't make it, maybe you're not sure why, it's a good idea to remove that from the landscape so that any pathogen that might be there doesn't infect other plants. Controlling weeds and excess vegetation. Some weeds can harbor some plant pathogens that can then jump over to your desirable edible plants or ornamental plants. So keeping your weeds under control is going to be good for the uh, reducing habitat for um, undesirable insects or vertebrate pests, but also it's a way to reduce plant pathogens. And then a lot of these plant pathogens are in the soil, and they may not attack all plants because not all pests attack all plants. So if you rotate your crops in the garden every year so that you're not always planting tomatoes or peppers in the same area in the same soil, if you have that soil dwelling pathogen and you have the host there, it'll just continue to infect it every year. So rotating your crops, changing, what you grow in an area, and also you could do some soil solarization, which is shown in the first picture here, where you take clear plastic and you cover the soil, you make sure that it gets nice and hot, and that will kill pathogens for the next growing season. And I think I might have a slide on soil solarization maybe a little bit later. And so these are all great sanitation practices, keeping in mind that some of the soil dwelling pathogens might stay in the soil until the conditions are right for them to grow. So there's plant pathologies, very very interesting and also sometimes hard to think about, like what you have to do, but there's a lot of ways that you can use these non-chemical methods to reduce the problems. One of the things that you can do when you are just planting a plant is to choose varieties that are resistant to a plant pathogen, a disease, a fungus, or viruses. And so choosing a plant that is known to not be susceptible to some of the common diseases will help you have to reduce the number of methods you need to control it. So there are varieties of roses and fruit trees and ornamental plants that are known to be resistant to things like verticillium or fusarium. Some are resistant to certain nematodes. And so thinking about that as a preventive way when you are first planting a plant. And of course, with any kind of pest pressure, you want to have the best plant care that you can. So with diseases in mind, keeping plants at a proper spacing, far enough away from each other, will allow them to grow well, giving them enough space to grow according to what that plant needs. But also having good spacing will maximize the air circulation and increase sunlight. And many of our plant pathogens, they thrive when plants are really close together, or there's not a lot of air circulation, or there's not enough sunlight. And so making sure you've got that as one aspect of your planting will help reduce the plant pathogens. In the case of powdery mildew, planting your plants in a sunny area will not favor the powdery mildew. And then you want to water deeply and infrequently, and try to direct the water at the ground, at the roots, and not on the foliage. If you do spray a plant for aphids, let's say, or you're hosing things down, you try to do that in the morning or late afternoon so that it has time to dry out throughout the day. If you wet the leaves in the evening, then they have the overnight with the moisture in the air, which will keep the plant moist for longer and can contribute to plant diseases. And then you do want to avoid damaging the roots or the trunks of plants, because those wounds can open up an area for diseases to enter. So through our activities of mowing or doing things in our landscape, try not to wound or damage your plants. All right, moving on to weeds. So weeds are different for different people. If you don't want it growing there, then it's a weed. If you don't mind it, then maybe it's not a weed. But there's a lot of non-chemical things that we can do to manage weeds. I will admit that this is my front yard. I have a lot of Dallas grass in my yard. You know, sometimes I choose to control them and sometimes I don't. So we do, in my family, we do a lot of hand weeding, and we choose the weeds we want to try and get out on the day that we're doing our gardening. So we can selectively remove weeds from our landscapes or garden beds. And if you don't have a lot of weeds in an area, hand pulling and using tools is a really good option. So weeds are easier to remove when they are younger, and also when the soil is a little moist. So if you are going to hand remove weeds, maybe try and irrigate the area a little bit first, which will help loosen the soil and allow you to get that root out. So frequently removing small weeds, and definitely using tools. If tools help you, sometimes you can't really get a good hold of the weed. And for some weeds, you must be able to get the whole taproot out. The lower picture there, you can see that's Lindsay. She's removing a dandelion with a tool, and you can see that tool has a little fork at the end. And some of our hand tools are great for getting the taproots out. So that fork will help pull the plant up and also allow the whole root. If you leave a little bit of a taproot for some of the really hard to control weeds, the weed will just regrow from there. And we do have an article and information on our website, as well as a video on different long-handled and short-handled tools for you to consider. An important aspect of controlling weeds is to make sure that they don't flower and set seed. Once they flower, the flowers then turn into seeds, and when they turn into seeds, they get dispersed, and then you have the potential for more weeds. So you want to cut off the seed heads or the flowers to make sure that they don't produce those seeds. Some weeds you can mow to achieve that, and that will cut them off and also keep your grass at the right height. but some weeds have adapted to growing really low so that any kind of mower doesn't cut off their flowers. Some clovers grow really well in that way. Some grasses like annual bluegrass, they've adapted to the way we mow. And so when you mow at your regular height, you're not getting all those flower heads. So you may need to, in addition to mowing, do some hand pulling, or you can take a string trimmer. If you can't mow an area, or if it's not that you've got these weeds in a lawn, you could take a string mower and get a little closer, or trim areas where around fence lines or other places where you can't get to the weeds with a mower. Whether you have a lawn or not, if you are trying to grow a lawn and trying to have your turf grass be competitive against weeds, you want to make sure that you have your mower set at the proper mowing height, which in general is you don't want to remove more than 1/3 of the desirable grass leaf blade. And you want to make sure that your mowing blades are sharp, and that will keep your grass healthy. We have another tool, in addition to hand pulling and weeding and string trimming. You can purchase a flame weeder. And the flame weeder is not a blowtorch. It is a designed tool that has kind of that conical cylinder at the end that you can see here. And you can see some of the heat coming at it. So it doesn't throw flames, which would be very dangerous. It does have high heat though, and you direct that cone to the weed that you want to control. And so what you do is really just quickly pass that cone, the heating element, over the young weeds that you want to kill. You are not trying to burn the whole weed to the ground, and burn it up completely. You are introducing the heat in a way that the plant starts to lose moisture, and it just ends up sort of dilapidating and dying in that way. So it's really just a short amount of heat. The flame weeders, I think, work best in hardscapes. So in the cracks or driveway, sidewalks, maybe not in a situation that we're seeing in this picture, although if you're just trying to burn it back from the path, that would work too. But the flame weeders are more effective on broadleaf weeds than grasses. And you want to be careful not to flame any dried out vegetation, or wood chips or mulch or anything flammable, because you don't want anything to catch fire. But again, there's not really an active fire. It's more of a heating element. So flame weeding, you can purchase them. It's a wand and a hose, and then you hook it up to a propane source, like you can see in this picture here. So flame weeders do work well in some situations. Similar to that is introducing heat in the way of steam or hot water. This is not always a practice that's ideal in backyard gardens. Some of the steam weeders are specially designed, and they're made more for professionals. They might be more expensive, or they can be kind of large and clunky. They do require a bit of water and energy, because they are designed to get that water up to a high temperature, so that they can kill the weeds. This you can see is on a school playground. So the steam weeders that are commercially available are sort of best used for the professionals. And as with most weed control tools, they work better on younger weeds, and kind of more on broadleaf weeds and annual weeds that are younger. The steam weeding and the flame weeding won't be useful for any weeds that have underground structures like little tubers. So nutsedge and oxalis that have those tubers, the flame and the steam is not going to touch those. So they don't work well for those. But the water does get hot. So while you might not burn yourself with a flame, you still can burn yourself with the water. And I've heard people say they boil water on their stove and then throw it on the driveway to burn the weeds. You can do that. It's kind of a lot of work, but you certainly can. A lot of the things that we're talking about today, they're not going to work in all situations. So again, what we're presenting today is very general control, and what you do does depend on your situation, your landscape, and what you feel comfortable doing or can physically do yourself. Here's my slide on soil solarization. So soil solarization can kill weeds and weed seeds, as well as some of the plant pathogens that are in the soil. You do need to limit the solarization to days where it's going to be very hot and sunny and clear. So the summer months are going to be the best time for soil solarization in areas that do have some sunny, hot days in the summer. Along the coast in some areas, the summer months are actually more foggy, so that's probably not the best time. Depending on where you live, soil solarization may not work if the temperatures don't get high enough. But generally, especially in Central California, we're going to need the summer for this. So you want to cover an area with clear plastic, the black plastic or blue tarps, brown tarps, they don't work. Clear plastic, and you want to leave it there for 4 to 6 weeks. You can see this area has it anchored down with just some rocks and sticks. You want to make sure that everything stays there, that the wind doesn't blow it, that there's no ripping. And ideally, you want the temperature to be maintained at 110 to 125 degrees Fahrenheit. In the previous picture that I had, there was a little thermometer that was stuck at the edge so that you can come and see that the temperature is high enough for you. And leave it there for, a month, month and a half, and that should kill most weeds, weed seeds, and plant pathogens. Not 100%. There are some weed seeds that are very resilient. Another great way to prevent weeds and keep weeds at bay is to use mulches. Mulches block light and suppress annual weeds from being able to germinate. You do want to remove any weeds that you have in there before you apply the mulch. That will give you the best control, not just throwing a big pile of mulch over existing tall weeds. That's not going to work. The larger size the mulch, the greater of the depth that's going to be required. There's different sizes and materials that make up different mulch. So many different kinds are available. Now, you don't just put a mulch down and that's done and your weeding, nightmares are over. It is not a permanent solution. Organic mulches do break down and you need to replenish them. Weeds can creep through any bare areas of mulches, but also people use rocks as mulch, which is totally fine, but weeds can still grow through rocks. So it's not a one and done solution. Mulches need to be used in addition to all the other things I was talking about, maybe flaming, maybe steaming in between the rocks or in between these pavers that are shown here. Hand pulling, maybe even using spot treatments of herbicides. So mulches, again, not a once and done. Some people like using fabric or plastic mulches underneath the organic mulch. Some people don't agree with using these. The black plastic does lack pores, so it restricts air and some water movement. There are many types of landscape fabrics that are more porous and allow water to go through. These might be better for tree and shrub plantings in an area that you're going to disturb and change annual plants. It's not great because then you might rip the landscape fabric and then it'll stick out. So, use them according to what your plan in your landscape or garden is. And again, not a permanent solution. Some weeds can grow through, especially if there have been rips or tears or where you have an opening for whatever plant you're putting there, weeds can still grow through. So mulch is one way to suppress weeds in addition to the other control methods. And then lastly, we've got sheet mulching, which can involve using cardboard or heavy paper that you stack over an area. You do still want to remove some existing weeds first, and you can do that by mowing, trimming, hand pulling, perhaps the use of herbicides. It all depends. And covering with cardboard, you want to overlap so there's no gaps. And then you can add an organic or a rock mulch on top of it, so you don't just have cardboard in your front yard. There has been a little controversy about whether sheet mulching works, whether it's good for the soil, how to do it. So there's not a ton of research. There's a lot of information out there, but there's not a ton of research. And myself and my colleague, Joanna Solons, we are looking at different aspects of sheet mulching in a trial right now to get some more information about all of that. But many people have been practicing sheet mulching for some time with good results. Sometimes it doesn't work for people. Different experiences out there. Oh, not my last slide on weeds. So watering, you want to make sure that you're watering your desirable plants and not providing water for the weeds to grow. So avoiding overwatering, avoiding getting having broken sprinkler heads or leaky pipes that can have water build up in an area. Weeds can definitely grow in that area. And then adjusting your irrigation for when it's going to rain. You want to make sure that you're not irrigating when it's actively raining. And I think that's about it. So we have a lot of information on our website on weeds and their conditions that are favorable to their growing. And that'll help you know what you might be able to fix, like fertility in the soil or overwatering or various other things. And adjusting those conditions will help reduce the type of weeds that you get there. All right, we are getting low on time, so I want to talk about vertebrates and then we will hopefully have time for questions. So vertebrates are also animal pests. Not all animals are considered pests, just like not all weeds or insects are considered pests. They're only a pest if they're doing something that you don't want them to do in your landscape. So vertebrate pests have legal restrictions that insect pests largely and weeds and diseases don't really have. Some species are protected and there may be restrictions on when or if you can control them, and you might need a permit. So we suggest you check with the California Department of Fish and Wildlife before trying to control any vertebrate pest in your landscape or garden. But again, with vertebrate pests, you want to remove sources that are going to be attractive to them. So make the environment less suitable. If there's any kind of vegetation or hiding places or food or debris where they can hide or eat, you want to remove that. So removing any hiding places or fallen fruit, trimming back any branches and shrubbery that might overhang on roofs that can be kind of a highway for them to get from the landscape into your attic or onto your building. Cleaning up the fallen fruit that could be a food source. And with garbage, there are a number of vertebrate pests that will get into our garbage and recycling. So you want to make sure that the lids fit well. And in some cases, you may need to bungee cord or somehow have a clasp to make the lid really tight on there so raccoons can't get in, or there's a whole other consideration for bears in certain areas. And then very importantly, don't feed wildlife. Don't put out food for the skunks. Don't put out food for the raccoons. It is actually illegal, but it's a bad practice to feed wildlife. Many different kinds of traps are available for both killing or capturing wildlife pests. They will depend on what kind of pest you have. So just with any kind of pest management, and I didn't say this before, you need to correctly identify your pest before doing any kind of management action. And this is really important with vertebrate pests too, because you need to get the right trap for the right type of vertebrate. So what's shown here are kill traps, and there are various styles specific to the pest. The one at the top is a pincher style, and this one is used for moles. Uh, Different traps are used for gophers, so you need to know whether you have a gopher or a mole. And we have ways for you to help recognize what kind of burrowing vertebrate pest you have, and these again are on the website. The trap at the bottom is being set. It looks like it's for a vole or maybe an outdoor rat. So trap placement and also whether you bait the trap or not is all very important. And this information is on our website, and I don't have time to get into the specifics of it. I do want to talk about live trapping. You've seen the traps where you can, it's like a cage and you catch the wildlife. So when you catch the wildlife, what are you going to do with it? The only legal thing to do is to release that animal on your property or on the location where it was found. You cannot relocate wildlife legally in California and many other states. It is inhumane to do so because you could be spreading diseases to other places. You could be causing that animal to die a slow and painful death through starvation and dehydration. And it's a bad idea and it's illegal. So you have to release the animal on the same property where you caught it. And that kind of defeats the purpose, because then it's just going to come back unless you've removed the food sources. So all of that is also in our vertebrate pest notes. I will say that exclusion, again, as I've talked about with the other pest categories, exclusion is important for vertebrate pests. You may not want to kill them, and that is not our goal too, is to say kill all the deer, kill all the squirrels. That is not what we promote at UC IPM. There are traps that are available to do so, but you can also exclude these pests by putting up barriers so they can't reach the plants that you don't want them to damage or eat. So you can see here some metal chicken wire fencing that is put around these newly planted trees. New plants are more susceptible to pests than older established plants. And while older established plants can still show some plant damage, most of the time a pest isn't going to kill an established plant, or at least insects and vertebrates may not. But when you have new plants, you want to give them all the time and space that they can to grow. So putting different kinds of baskets or hardware cloth or chicken wire to exclude these plants while those plants are just starting to grow. And what you use does depend on where it's grown and what kinds of pests you might have to deal with. The chicken wire is not going to keep out any rats or mice because they can get right through those openings, but it will work for gophers and deers and deer and moles and rabbits. And so if you've got vertebrate pests that are coming under your porch or decks or somewhere else getting through your fence, you can close off these areas, putting up kind of a mesh cloth or chicken wire, or fixing any openings so that they cannot go under there and find a nice place to live and harbor. There are different kinds of trunk guards that are made out of more of a hard plastic that you can use around trees to protect them from gnawing or nibbling by rabbits, deer, other things. And then I mentioned netting before for birds. So there are various types of bird spikes or bird nets that you can put on buildings or eaves to not allow birds to roost or nest there. And there are nets that you can put over whole trees to keep the birds from getting to your fruit. Those are a little harder to deal with, but they're available. Things that don't work include some of the frightening devices. You can see this picture of an owl, and right under the eave where that owl is a whole nest of birds. So they are not at all scared by this owl. There are many ultrasonic devices that they sell that are also not proven to work. And there are some things that work, like metal flagging, that causes a little confusion or scares them off. But some of these things do not work. A lot of plant or scents, repelling plants, do not repel most wildlife because they do get used to the scent. And so those haven't shown to work. For gopher and mole burrows, flooding is not recommended. You cannot legally drown wildlife. So drowning ground squirrels or anything that you might have caught in the live traps is not legal. I hear people say that they catch them and then they drown them in the swimming pool. And that is frankly a little disgusting, but it is also inhumane to drown wildlife. It's illegal and inhumane. And while there's a lot of biological control that we promote for using predators to control things like gophers, they do work well, but it's not going to get 100% of your gophers or 100% of your rats or mice. So biological control is an aspect of vertebrate pest management in addition to the trapping and the exclusion and the other methods that I've talked about. So, in summary, there's a lot of different tools available that may not require any kind of chemical or pesticide management. And we listed a lot of them today, but it does depend on which pest you are trying to control. And you always want to integrate these methods. That's what integrated pest management is, that we are using prevention and cultural control, physical, biological, and if needed, chemical control. UC IPM has a ton of information. This is the newer look of our website, and anyone here would probably want to go to the home and landscape section, and you'll find lots of information by plant type or by pest type. And we have a ton of different resources like our pest notes libraries and lots of different information. So I know I'm very over time, but we do have a few minutes for questions, and thank you.
Thank you, Karey, for discussing the various ways we can manage pests without pesticides.